Up to this point, we've only solved equations that look like this. Sine of x is equal to 1/2. The b value has been 1, okay? The number inside of this x has been 1. There are other types of problems where you have actual b values that are different than 1, bigger or smaller. So 3x, 2x, 1/2 x. What does the b value do to the graph? Vertically or horizontally, it stretches it, right? Okay. So if we did a graphical analysis of this, so cos of x is equal to negative root 3 over 2. Cosine graph starts at 1, 90, 180, 270. Looks like that. Negative 1, 1. And if I say, where does cosine equal negative root 3 over 2? Negative root 3 over 2, I'm just going to guess it's right there. A horizontal line. We get 2 answers. Those answers are actually 150 degrees and 210 degrees. Now, if I say cos 2x is equal to negative root 3 over 2, what does this 2 here do to the graph? How does it change the look of the graph? By a factor of 1/2, right? So this is a horizontal stretch by 1/2. So what it does is it actually compresses it horizontally. So everything will move. I'm going to draw it quickly here. So I want the visual to that. Period of this graph. How often does this graph repeat itself? What's the distance between peaks? 180. So the period of this graph has changed to 180. And if I drew the line root 3 over 2, negative root 3 over 2, we'll guesstimate that it's right there. How many answers do I get now? You get 4 answers, okay? And in fact, those answers are 75, 105, 255, and 280. Do you see a connection between the first 2 answers of this graph and the other 2 answers and the previous graph, this one over here, the original cos x? They are half of the answers, right? If I divide 150 by 2, I get 75. If I divide 210 by 2, I get 105. All right? So they're half. Do you see, how do I go from 75 to 255? What have I added? 180. I've added the period, okay? And if I add 180 to 105, I get that one. So, number of answers is increased by a factor of 2, okay? And the difference between those answers are multiples of the period of the new graph, okay? All right, that's the visual representation of it. Let's do it algebraically. So we're gonna skip this stuff and go to, we're not gonna do it graphically. We wanna do it algebraically. So we're gonna go right here. All right. Sine 2x is equal to negative 1/2. All right. The first bit, you just do it as you normally would. Okay. We were we just go, all right, where is sine negative? What quadrants? 3 and 4. So we're in 3 and 4. And then I find the reference angle. Okay. So it's going to be sine to the minus 1 of a half, which gives me a reference angle of 30 degrees. So I know this is 30 degrees, and this is 30 degrees. Now, here's the only thing you have to remember. And you don't even have to remember it because it's written for you. We're solving for 2x, not x. So it's 2x is equal to, okay, what are my rotation angles? What is the first one to get to that 30? 210. And then to go all the way around, it's 330. Now, how many answers do you think I should have? 4, right? Because we've shrunk it by a factor of 2. If I had shrunk it by a factor of 3, how many answers would I have? 6. If I did it by a factor of 10, I would have, seen a pattern here? All right. So I need to get my other 2 answers. Well, actually, let's solve for x first. So I don't want to solve for 2x, let's solve for x. So how do I get rid of the 2? You divide them both by 2. And you get x is equal to 105 and 165. And then to get the remaining answers, you add multiples of the period. So to get my next answer, I go, well, what's the period of this graph? 180 degrees, right? Because remember yesterday we learned that period is 360 over your b value. Our b value is 2, so it's 180. So I add 180. 105 plus 180 is 285. And then I add 180 to 165. And I get 345. Now you would keep going until you exceed the domain. What's our domain? 360. They've limited us, right? So if I add 180 to 285, what's going to happen? If I go plus 180, how many have 465? But this is outside of our domain, so we stop. So we do not include that answer. Okay? So, what are my answers? It's the first 4. It's 105, 165, 285, and 345. Is that okay? Same process, except at this point, you divide off whatever your b value is. It'll cut all the angles in half. Sometimes if it's a fraction, it'll increase them. And then you keep adding multiples of the period until you exceed the domain. All right? Now, second part ties into what we just did. How do I get the general solution to this graph? What do you do for the general solution? You add multiples of the period. That's it. So just take your answers. You technically only need the first 2 because we've already added multiples of the period to get the second 2. And you go plus, and we're just going to do this all in degrees just because we've already started. Plus n 360. And that will give you every single answer. And you don't have, you should technically say any I, n is any integer. Is that okay? All we've done is only one twist. Divided by whatever your b value is, and add multiples of the period until you exceed your domain. That's your solution in restricted domain. The general solution is still take your first two answers and just add multiples of the period. And it's not 360, it's 180, isn't it? (180°). That's important. All right, it's multiples of the period of this function. Is that okay? All right, 4, 5, and 6, please.